This is the city of Yeketrinburg. It is 1,420 kilometers east of Moscow, roughly 5,070 kilometers west of Vladivostok, and the nearest neighboring country is Kazakhstan, roughly 350 kilometers south. Situated in the Sverdlovsk Oblast, just east of the Ural mountains, Yeketrinburg sits right next to the official boundary where European Russia ends and Asian Russia begins. With a population of roughly 1.5 million residents, Yeketerinburg is the fourth largest city in Russia, the second largest in Siberia, and the largest in the Ural Federal District, as well as one of the main cultural and industrial centers of Russia. It has contributed significantly to the development of modern Europe and major events in world history.
So how was this city founded? What historic significance does it have? And what is it like living there? Let's find out.
Before the reforms of Peter the Great that focused on modernizing Russia and turning it into a European nation, Russia did not devote much time deciding where Europe ended and Asia began. In the minds of the Russians, there was no separation. Russia was Russia from east to west. Then in 1720, Peter the Great gave orders to construct a large industrial town in the Urals to gather the region's mineral wealth.
This town eventually turned into the city of Yeketerinburg. And besides the Ural Mountains themselves, it was this city that was to define the boundaries between east and west.
Today, this monument, roughly 40 kilometers west of Yeketerinburg, in the town of Pervo-Uralsk, marks the location where the two continents are split.
The man tasked with the order to lay the foundations of Yeketerinburg was Vasily Tatishev, a man also credited with the founding of Perm and Orenburg.
Eventually, he chose a spot on the Iset River and called the new town Yekaterinburg after Catherine I, wife of Peter the Great. Therefore, Yekaterinburg was formally established in 1723 around a metallurgical factory. The town became the main supplier of copper coins for the Russian Empire. To better project military power in the area, construction of a new fortress around the Yekaterinburg settlement began on 3rd of March 1723. It was in use until the end of the century when it was demolished as the boundaries of the city kept expanding far too rapidly.
Similar to St. Petersburg, Yekaterinburg was a planned city and a large number of foreigners, especially Germans, moved there. Yekaterinburg became known as Siberia's window to Europe, connecting eastern and western Russia and even China. As a result, trade and commerce prospered and Catherine the Great declared the city a capital of the region, turning it into a notable cultural and intellectual hub.
Besides factories and mining, some of the oldest notable buildings include Kharitonov Palace, arguably the grandest residence in the Urals. This neoclassical townhouse was commissioned in 1794 and was further improved and built upon after 1824, and is still an impressive looking building today. Trinity Cathedral is an Orthodox church that was built between 1818 and 1839. Upon its partial completion, it proved to be popular and drew many worshippers. Following the Russian Revolution and the subsequent formation of the Soviet Union, the church began to be negatively affected by the Soviet government's atheistic policies, which included the closure of many religious institutions. The former church would go on to host a cinema and a coat factory during the Soviet era, with many parts of the building falling into disrepair. Since then, however, it has been restored and the first religious service was conducted in 1996.
Over the 19th century, Yekaterinburg grew into a center for gold and precious stones that were dug up in the Ural Mountains, as it was officially given the title of one of the centers for mining in Russia, which brought with itself benefits such as its own military contingent that was meant to defend the mines and its works.
Roofing iron made in Yekaterinburg was used to cover the roof of the House of Parliament in England. Ural steel was used to construct the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and the region's copper was used to make the Statue of Liberty. Similar to other major cities in Siberia, it gained a lot with the development of railways. The first line was constructed connecting it with Perm, finished in 1887, and a year later a track was laid to Tyumen. In 1895, the Trans-Siberian Railway started operating.
As a result, the population of Yekaterinburg reached 45,000 by the end of the century and hit 70,000 by 1913. On the eve of the Russian Revolution in 1917, Yekaterinburg had become a sizable city with about 100,000 residents and close to 50 factories producing metallurgical and industrial goods for Tsarist Russia.
The Bolsheviks, who had later formed the Communist Party, had a strong following in the Urals. As such, they had a foothold in Yekaterinburg throughout most of the war. Only in the early stages of the war in 1918, it was briefly held by Admiral Kolchak, a leader of the White Army anti-Bolshevik forces. However, as the White forces were not as well organized, they were pushed out of Yekaterinburg and eventually out as far as Irkutsk, until the Russian Revolution was a lost cause for them.
A pivotal moment in Russian history occurred in mid-1918 as Tsar Nicholas was forced to abdicate the throne to the Russian Empire. He and his family were placed under house arrest in Tsarskoye Selo in St. Petersburg. But as unrest there intensified, it was no longer perceived to be a safe enough location, and they were transferred to Tobolsk in Yekaterinburg.
Around midnight on the 17th of July 1918, the family was awoken and told that the White Army had surrounded the house. They were then led into the cellar. Then Tsar Nicholas and members of the royal family were executed. His wife Empress Alexandra, their 5 children were shot and bayoneted to death.
The Soviet government tried keeping the murders a secret as long as it could, but the bodies were eventually uncovered in 1991. Vladimir Lenin is alleged to have given the command of execution. It is theorized that the command was given to prevent the possibility of the Tsar's family from being rescued by the White Army, which was nearby.
To this day, possibly the most visited tourist attraction in Yekaterinburg is the location where the executions took place. Church on Blood, Khram na Krovye, which was completed in 2003, was erected as a memorial to the family near the location of the executions.
In 1924, a year after the conclusion of the Russian Revolution, Yekaterinburg was renamed to Sverdlovsk after Yakov Sverdlovsk, a famous Bolshevik from the Urals. He is sometimes regarded as the first head of state of the Soviet Union.
Having acquired a new name, Yekaterinburg kept growing throughout the early 20th century, becoming a vital industrial center, especially for the creation of tanks and munitions during the Second World War, as over 700 factories and state technical institutions relocated to the area from Western Russia in efforts to maintain production during World War II. As such, the whole Ural region basically became Russia's war factory, keeping the nation in the war, manufacturing much needed supplies that eventually, through sheer manpower and the industriousness of the Soviet regime, provided the necessary means to overcome the German advance. As a result, going into the Cold War, there were many factories in the area specializing in anti-aircraft guns, artillery units, and anti-aircraft rocket systems. Relics of this time are scattered throughout the city. Missiles and fighter planes are proudly on display in public places. Just outside Yekaterinburg, there's also the Military Technology Museum, which has one of the biggest military vehicle collections in the world that is still expanding.
About a third of Sverdlovsk's population was employed in the military-industrial complex, and for many decades it was a closed city, meaning that no foreigners were allowed to go there, and even Russian citizens needed permits.
On the 2nd of April 1979, spores of anthrax were accidentally released from the Soviet military research facility. The cause of the outbreak was denied for years by the Soviet authorities, who were blaming the deaths on consumption of tainted meat. All medical records of the victims were removed to hide serious violation of the Biological Weapons Convention that had come in effect in 1975. As the economy has modernized, Yekaterinburg transformed into what it is today, no longer dominated by heavy industry. Financial centers, services, and tourism have reinvigorated the city. Yekaterinburg is a major center for the Russian tourist industry. In 2015, the city was the top 5 most visited Russian cities, others being Moscow, St. Petersburg, Novosibirsk, and Vladivostok. The standard of living in Yekaterinburg exceeds the average standard across Russia. A person working in Yekaterinburg typically earns around 120,000 rubles per month. Salaries range between 30,000 and 530,000 rubles. Yekaterinburg is the 3rd largest transport hub of Russia, behind Moscow and St. Petersburg. The formation of Yekaterinburg as an important transportation hub is largely due to the city's favorable geographical location on a low stretch of the Ural Mountains, through which it was convenient to lay the main roads connecting the European and eastern parts of Russia. One major issue faced by the city is congestion. The level of car ownership in 2015 reached 410 cars per 1,000 people. This pace has seriously exceeded development and the capacity of the road infrastructure in the city. For the first time, transport problems started to appear in the 1980s, and though it did not seem threatening at first, the situation has gotten worse. Studies have shown that as early as 2005, the capacity limit for the road network was reached, which has now led to permanent congestion. According to this CBS article, Yekaterinburg is the 17th most congested city in the world, slightly better than Cairo in Egypt and worse than Chongqing in China. Yekaterinburg is served by 2 primary airports, Koltsovo International Airport and the smaller Yekaterinburg Aramil Airport. Koltsovo is one of the largest airports in the country, serving 5.4 million passengers in 2017, making it the 7th busiest airport in Russia. The ISET Tower became the tallest structure of Yekaterinburg on the 24th of March 2018, but the unfinished TV tower nearby was demolished as part of the city's beautification program in preparation for 2018 FIFA World Cup. It was also the tallest building outside Moscow until it was surpassed by the Lakhta Center in St. Petersburg, which is currently the tallest building in Europe. According to Skyscraper Central, Yekaterinburg is the 159th tallest city in the world, 13th tallest in Europe, and 2nd tallest in Russia. As for the climate, it is classified as humid and continental, characterized by sharp variability in weather conditions, with well-marked seasons. The Ural Mountains, despite their insignificant height, block air from the west. As a result, the central Urals are open to invasion of cold Arctic air and continental air from West Siberian Plain. Equally warm air masses from the Caspian Sea and the deserts of Central Asia can freely penetrate from the south. Therefore, the weather in Yekaterinburg is characterized by sharp temperature fluctuations and weather anomalies. The average temperature in January is -12.6. The recorded minimum temperature was -44.6. Average July temperature is 19. The recorded maximum temperature recorded was 38.8, meaning that summers can be just as brutal as winters in this part of the world. To sum it up, Yekaterinburg is one of the most progressive modern cities in Russia, but its strategic geographic location is bound to have a bright future. And aside from some of the worst traffic congestion in the world and some hard weather, it is a good place to live.